This deferral means that over the next 6 months, $458 million will remain with employers to help them pay employees and continue operating. We strongly encourage commercial landlords to pass these savings on to business tenants through reduced or deferred lease payments. We also, as I say, these savings are expected to be fully realized by Albertans and by Alberta employers. This is very important because as so many businesses are shut their doors this month in response to the public health crisis, we need those employers to know that there will be, we're not going to drain their bank accounts from payments. They will have more cash on hand to get through this challenging time so they can reopen their doors when the public health crisis has abated. We will also be deferring Workers' Compensation Board premiums to allow private sector employers until the end of this year, affecting approximately 184,000 businesses. A deferral provides flexibility and support while employers maintain their WCB coverage and injured workers continue to receive the benefits and supports they need to work. This will not affect benefits for injured workers. It simply is a deferral on the premiums for the employers. And as a further step, small and medium-sized private sector employers will only have to pay for half of their 2020 Workers' Compensation Board premiums. Government will take care of the other half. So for small and medium-sized businesses, we're cutting in half their WCB premiums this year, and for anything for the next several months, they won't have to make payments in any event. This means up to 183 small and medium-sized employers will have immediate financial relief as we deal with the pandemic. Employers who have already paid some of their 2020 WCB premiums will be refunded upon request or have the amount paid credited to their account. We're doing everything we can to support families and employers through this crisis and are continually reassessing the situation. This is in addition to the $1,146 biweekly emergency isolation payments, which will become available on My Alberta this week. People will be able to apply through alberta.ca. That is a bridge payment for folks who have to be in isolation until a similar federal program kicks in early April. It's also in addition to our deferral of business taxes this year, to our direction to the Alberta Treasury branches and to credit unions to provide for mortgage payment relief as well as flexibility on commercial loan and personal loans. It's in addition to our elimination of AER fees for the balance of the year for energy producers and our direction to gas and electricity utilities companies not to engage in collections for the next 3 months, giving people relief on the utilities payments. It's also in addition to our deferral on Alberta student loan payments, as well as the government will be covering the interest costs in the interim, and in addition to the $500,000 emergency supplement to the health budget, the $60 million civil society fund that is helping homeless shelters and charities serve the most vulnerable at this time. I have a couple of other messages before taking your questions. First of all, we have tens of thousands of snowbirds returning home from points south now at the end of March. We need to send a message to all of them that they must self-isolate at their homes immediately upon return to Alberta. This does not mean going to the grocery store. It does not mean going to the kennel to pick up your dog. It does not mean dropping your RV off at a service company to be serviced. It does not mean going and visiting the grandkids. It means one thing and one thing only. When you come into the country, whether you're driving north through Coots or you're landing in one of our airports, you must go directly and immediately to your home without stopping. And if you need supplies at home, if you need groceries or other critical supplies, you've got to call family, friends, or neighbors to help you out with that, or delivery services. We will not tolerate people coming in from overseas and then mixing with the general population. They would be threatening public health in Alberta. I cannot emphasize this strongly enough. We have heard too many stories about people who think that this is the self-isolation rule for 14 days upon arrival is some kind of a vague general hint or suggestion. It is not. It is an absolute public health imperative, and we are prepared to, if necessary, use stronger legal tools to impose that obligation on people and stronger penalties if they violate that direction of our public health officer. And finally, we've been made aware of a number of scams and fraudulent operations targeting the vulnerable at this time of crisis. A number of people have called the AHS Health Link to report that they had received a call from someone claiming to be from Alberta Health Services who told them they had tested positive for COVID-19. The caller then requested the person's personal health care number, ID, and credit card information. In addition, cybersecurity incidents involving malware and fraudulent activities, including identity theft, are being reported across Alberta in the wake of COVID-19. Cybercriminals are sending emails and setting up fake websites designed to trick people into clicking links that install malicious software on their computers or capture credentials and other personal information. In light of these scams, Albertans should exercise caution when clicking on links or providing personal information to people or organizations that request that information about COVID if it's done so unsolicited. Such emails could be claiming to offer links to new information or to buy surgical masks or sanitizers. Beware of suspicious emails and web links, and always think twice before you click. If you want to go to where you get the authentic, verified, official government information on the COVID response, go to alberta.ca/COVID-19. I have to say, and then finally, once again, a message. There is no need for people to engage in hoarding. This morning I did a volunteer stint at the Hope Mission here in Edmonton, the homeless shelter and soup kitchen, and they told me that they've seen the number of people coming in to receive free meals has gone up by nearly 80% in the past 2 weeks, and yet they are struggling to get supplies because their suppliers are being stressed by the demand in the grocery stores and in the grocery system. This is outrageous. So folks, the poorest amongst us are being hurt by people who are unnecessarily hoarding. So let me just say to those who are trying to exploit seniors and others during this time of a public health emergency, there must be a special place in hell for people like that. Just stop it. And it is completely un-Canadian. It is un-Albertan. It is unacceptable. It is illegal. And if we catch anybody who's engaged in these kinds of frauds or scams, I guarantee you the book will be thrown at them and they will face the full force of the law. If people are aware of any of these frauds or scams, please report them to the Government of Alberta by going to alberta.ca. Happy to take your questions.
Can I ask you two questions? One is, you're on the call tonight with the Prime Minister?
Yes, and the other premiers, yeah.
Yeah. What are your messages? What are your asks?
Our message will be that the Alberta Public Health authorities have done brilliant work. We're leading the country in testing and tracking and containment. Where we need federal support is in procuring supplementary equipment because we don't know how long we're going to be in on this. We want to have as much personal protection equipment as possible, not only for our healthcare workers, but for everybody from police to and paramedics to workers at homeless shelters. That's one thing. So we are already working with the Government of Ontario on that, those extraordinary efforts at domestic procurement of equipment. But our message will also be that we need the federal government to step up to the plate in an unprecedented way to help keep this economy from a complete collapse. We have seen governments around the world. The United States is now on the brink of a $2 trillion economic rescue package. The British government, £330 billion, which would be the equivalent of about half a trillion Canadian dollars. And so we are going to need federal action in that scale. We are doing our part based on our means as a provincial government, and we will do more. We are going to keep some of our powder dry until after the public health crisis and the economy begins to grow again, to surge demand through stimulative spending. But in particular, Alberta needs bold federal action to help ensure a future for Canada's largest industry, which is our energy industry. We also hope that they will act strongly to save the Canadian aviation sector, nearly 40% of which is based out of WestJet here, headquartered in Alberta. So those would be some of our higher profile requests. I can say Minister Toews has been in very frequent contact with his federal counterpart, Bill Morneau, on those and other issues.
You talked about the concerns over people not self-isolating, and you may ramp up punitive measures or enforcement measures. Can you elaborate a bit? What are you looking at? What would the tipping point be to bring those in?
Well, we'll be discussing that later today at our Emergency Management Committee of Cabinet. We do have the power to issue quarantine orders. I have directed that we further increase the Alberta Health presence at ports of entry, including we've already done that since last week at the Calgary and Edmonton airports and at the Coots border crossing. I've asked that we look at taking one step further and look at potentially issuing people with quarantine orders, so there is no ambiguity whatsoever of their obligation to go directly home and self-isolate for 14 days. There currently is a $100 fine for ignoring the current orders. We could significantly increase those penalties. I note that some other provinces have done that.
Lisa?
Mr. Premier, you talked about the government looking into what it can do to protect people from evictions. We're now 8 days away from April 1st. Is there any movement on that? Will the government ban evictions?
Well, first of all, there is a significant backlog on evictions, and we are considering a potential short-term stay on enforcement of evictions. But please note that most of the eviction orders that would currently be in the system predate the COVID crisis. Many of them would be renters who have not paid their rent for several months, or who have been engaged in criminal activity or vandalism or operating grow ops. We need to be, landlords need to be able to continue to protect the value of their property from bad tenants. At the same time, we call upon landlords to do the right thing, and wherever possible, extend rent relief during this difficult time to their tenants. It makes no economic sense for them to evict tenants for missing April rent, given the effective shutdown of our economy, because who else is going to fill those units? We also would ask any landlords who benefit from mortgage payment deferrals from the banks, or other forms of relief like this provincial property tax deferral, we would ask them to pass those savings on to their tenants. We have a working group within the government. My principal secretary is on the phone right now with officials from Alberta Seniors and Housing, with municipalities, and with the rental sector, to see if there are additional measures that we can take. We're also consulting with other provincial governments that are facing the same challenge. I would just point out that the notion of barring landlords from collecting rent over the next 2 or 3 months could lead to a total collapse of the stock of housing that's available to people. So we have to be very careful about how we deal with this, and that's why we're developing additional policies, and our cabinet will be meeting on those policy ideas later this week.
Fletcher?
Premier, on the tax relief being offered today, hearing from a number of businesses, and they're just beside themselves that there's zero revenue coming in right now. How, based on some of the models that you might have right now, how much difference will this make, do you think, for some of those people who are just saying, a little bit of a break here, a little bit of a break there probably doesn't make a difference? I've got no revenue.
So, exactly. So, look, first of all, we're doing everything we can within our control to stop taking money out of their bank accounts, just to keep them as liquid in terms of their cash as possible. So we've announced, obviously, the deferrals on Alberta business taxes, now on property taxes, on various kinds of fees and payments. And Minister Toews is looking at the entire range of provincial fees that are charged to see what we could suspend, defer, forgive. So we're doing everything we can to at least relieve that financial pressure from them. But clearly, bigger steps may be necessary that are beyond the fiscal power of the government of Alberta. I see that in Denmark, you know, that the government has stepped in to offer payments of 80% of salary up to a certain cap for anybody who's had to leave work at this time to keep a connection with the employer to help accelerate the restart when we get through this. And I think the U.S. Congress is looking at similar measures. So we're going to ask the federal government, especially for those small, you know what? The larger businesses that have big balance sheets and large lines of credit are generally better equipped to get through this crash in their revenues. But I'm really concerned about the SMEs. I was chatting with a friend of mine who runs a small restaurant on White Avenue in Strathcona yesterday. He said that, first of all, he hasn't gotten a dime out of his own business for over 3 months. Basically, the only income he gets is tips from waiting tables, and he owns the restaurant. And he's had to lay off 3/4 of his staff, and that was before this moment, where he's now having to shut down completely. And he doesn't know whether he'll be able to reopen. So we'll continue to work with the federal government on additional ideas about how we can ensure that those businesses survive this difficult period. Do you want to complement that, Travis?
Well, sure, Premier. And with respect to the Workers' Compensation Board premium deferral, again, the deferral in total is $1.1 billion, so it's a significant deferral that will drive liquidity or cash availability to businesses in the province. But for small and medium-sized businesses, again, as the Premier noted, we're going to be covering half of their annual premium. So that's approximately $350 million. And many of these businesses, small businesses, have already paid their premium, or their premium is coming due right now. So for those that have paid it, they will be getting, they can apply for a rebate, which will be cash back in their pockets. For those that have the bill sitting on their counter right now, they're relieved of paying it. So as the Premier noted, we're looking at everything we can do within our ability to provide cash relief and ultimate expense relief to those, especially small and medium-sized businesses.
Janet?
This is for the Premier. So we've seen other provinces or other provincial legislatures and the House of Commons.
Travis, give me a little more social distancing there, my friend.
Sure.
It's supposed to be 2 meters, I think, is the rule.
That's exactly my question, which is about there's social distance measures that are being taken place in other legislatures that are sitting on an emergency basis. Is it still safe for the Alberta legislature to sit? And what specific measures are you taking to keep people apart from each other? We've seen some MLAs express concern.
Yes, we believe it's safe, and it's first of all, I think it's essential that the basic institutions of our society continue to function, and so I consulted with the Leader of the Opposition twice in the past 10 days on this point, and last Thursday afternoon we came to an understanding that we should keep the legislature in session and available to meet as necessary when important business arises. The government may be coming forward with additional legislative amendments to facilitate our emergency response, both on the public health and the economic side. And so we need the legislature to be able to do that. And I do think the legislature should be able to meet, at least on a limited basis at this difficult time, to review our entire government response to the COVID-19 crisis. We did discuss a protocol where we would keep less than 50 members in the legislature at any given time, so we can space out there. So to be clear, the public health direction is no organized events of more than 50 people. There was an exception made, obviously, for essential services, including the legislature. So we're developing, the two House leaders, the government and official opposition House leader, are developing an agreement so that both caucuses would keep the numbers down to less than 50 and space each other out in the legislature. So we're not concerned about the public health aspect of that. And basically, the agreement is to operate on a limited as-needs basis in the next several weeks until this is over.
Just a follow-up question that's totally unrelated from my colleague about the Babylon app. So apparently there was some notice given to the Privacy Commissioner that this was going forward, but they're not going to be able to get around to reviewing the privacy concern around this app for something like a year. So what sort of steps did your government take to make sure that this app was in compliance with privacy law before you deployed it?
Well, I'd have to refer that very specific question to the Minister of Health, but I will say that the Babylon platform has been used in some of the most advanced public healthcare systems in the world for several years now, beginning with the National Health Service in the United Kingdom. And its first widespread application was next door in British Columbia, where it was authorized by the current New Democrat government of British Columbia. And so our understanding is that it is operated in full compliance with privacy laws in those jurisdictions. And generally, European privacy laws are even more rigorous than ours in Canada. So I don't, I think we have some confidence in this platform. And let me just say, there are a lot of misunderstandings floating online about the application. This is simply a 21st century version of calling up the doctor. These are secure. It's not the only application of its nature. There are several online applications for